The Starlink internet service, which is owned by Elon Musk, has become a major asset in global politics. The satellite network has given Ukraine's military crucial internet access for the country's defense. Other nations are watching, and they also want the benefits of space-based communications, but they do not want to have to rely on Elon Musk. Now, against mounting tensions with China, Taiwan is now working to set up its own independent satellite network. DW's Melissa Chan reports from Taipei.
First, a crash course on satellites. They come in many sizes these days, sent into space on rockets that launch them into different orbits for different functions. Elon Musk's Starlink operates in low Earth orbit to provide space-based internet connections. It dominates the field with more than 7,000 satellites circling the globe in a constellation. Europe's Eutelsat is the second biggest space internet operator, but with just over 600 satellites, it doesn't even come close. This means that in times of crisis, Starlink can call the shots, and it does in parts of Ukraine. You can see here where the operator has restricted use, particularly along the front line and areas occupied by Russian forces. And this is what no country wants, to lose control.
Satellite internet services are extra important in wartime, especially here in Taiwan, where recently some of the undersea cables apparently got sabotaged, most likely by China. We're here at Tron Future, a Taiwanese defense startup, and they told us that they can't show us that much because so much of it is top secret, but let's see what they have to say.
Tron Future is part of a coordinated effort to make this island more satellite self-reliant. So tell us about what this is.
Okay, this is some of the early product that we developed for TASA.
For the space agency.
For the space agency,
yeah.
So for TASA, Taiwan Space Agency. So this is what we call it a downlink transmitter. This is a payload. It's just part of the satellite. For this particular case, it's a communication, like I'll say, it's a communication system.
Is it possible to get China out of the entire supply chain when it comes to something like satellite technology?
Yes, from day one, there was no Chinese part within our products, basically.
What's your capacity like right now? If suddenly you got an order for 1,000 parts of something critical in a satellite, would you be able to do that, or 10,000?
We will be able to produce a few hundred of this per month this year, basically.
William Yang is with the International Crisis Group. He says Taiwan is at the infancy stage of capabilities.
They have been making a lot of progress in recent years, but when it comes to sophistication, I think we are still definitely not entirely there yet.
Companies such as Europe's Eutelsat offer Taiwan an interim solution for lower Earth orbit services. With some analysts saying Beijing might invade as soon as 2027, there's no time to waste in setting up non-Starlink alternatives.
One key reason for Taiwan to work on diversifying its satellite provider is because of the potential vulnerability of relying on one sole provider who may have a conflict of interest with their other business interest in China.
With just one satellite of its own so far, Taiwan has its work cut out. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has shown the world how much modern warfare relies on not just what's happening on the ground, but what's happening up above. This video shows the satellites passing over China and Taiwan at any given moment. Pull out, and you get a sense of just how many there are and how daunting the challenge is for countries at a disadvantage. A fact that has propelled many governments, not just Taiwan's, to get going in this satellite space race.
Well, I'm joined now by the journalist and author David Ariosto. In his latest book, Open Space, he discusses the science and technology behind the power competition in outer space. It's good to have you with us. I have to ask you, even if Taiwan is successful, if it is able to put that satellite network into orbit, what will China do in case there is a military conflict? Does China have the means, the technology to take down that network?
Yeah, China for the last several years has been developing anti-satellite technology with both kinetic strikes, microwave strikes, using laser technologies. There's all sorts of ways in which they could target a Taiwanese satellite or Taiwanese like burgeoning satellite constellation. There's a bigger question, though, I think, though, with regard to Taiwan and its reliance on the U.S. because can Taiwan catch up with SpaceX? No. Can Taiwan catch up with China? No. But can Taiwan rely on the U.S., which also relies on sort of an iteration of Starlink, which is called Starshield, as a viable partner? That's a maybe within the course of this administration. But in the broader construct in terms of the technical feasibility of taking out satellites, China has proven more than capable. That they've been operating in this space for well over 2 decades now. The questions of redundancies are big in this regard. That's partly why Starlink was so effective in Ukraine, because of the sheer volume of satellites on orbit. You take one down, the signals simply transfer to another. That's kind of what you need in lower Earth orbit. Taiwan's sole satellite right now is in geosynchronous orbit, which essentially mimics the spin of the Earth and stays in tandem right over a stationary location. So, they don't have to be a Starlink. They don't have to have the kind of network constellations that China have. They certainly don't have to have a Starshield, but they might be able to rely on that. And they might be able to at least sort of weather the initial foray of an impending invasion.
Let me ask you about Starlink's competition. I'm thinking of Europe's Eutelsat. What would it take for it and other companies to be able to catch up? Is that even possible, do you think?
I don't think so, to be frank. At this point, Starlink is in excess of 7,000 satellites. To give you a little bit of context in terms of what that means, of all the satellites that have been ever launched in the history of space, 40% of them are Starlink satellites.
Wow.
So that gives you just sort of scope of the volume of how far ahead. And the question is why, right? Well, it's reusability. So the capacity to relaunch Falcon 9s and Falcon Heavies 12, 18, 19, 25 times, and just put up a dizzying cadence of satellites on orbit is unmatched in the modern landscape. That being said, that's going to change as technology goes through its own maturation process. The space is more democratized in terms of access to particularly how you put put rockets in orbit in a reusable way. You'll start to see that maybe even out in some capacity. But the question of infrastructure, rules of the road, how much is already sort of up there. SpaceX has it's hard to overstate the enormity of a head start that SpaceX has, particularly because of rocket reusability.
Yeah, but I mean, amazing though. 40% of all satellites. Who would have thought? Just fascinating. Unfortunately, David, we're out of time, but we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. David Ariosto, thank you.
Thank you.
And for a deeper dive into this, let's bring in Malcolm Davis. He's a senior analyst with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute and joins us from Canberra. Thanks for being with us. Now, Taiwan's satellite programs are far behind, as we just saw, but Taiwan is technologically advanced. It makes the world's most advanced semiconductors, for example. How quickly could Taiwan catch up in satellite tech?
Well, I think they could catch up fairly quickly. They have what's known as second mover advantage in the sense that they're not having to reinvent satellites themselves. They can see what's available in the commercial sector. They can go to space conferences here in Australia, for example. We have the International Astronautical Congress in Sydney in late September, which is the world's largest space industry conference. So Taiwan can send delegates to that to see what technologies are available, understand the technologies, and then fairly quickly develop their own capabilities. So it's certainly not a case that they have to spend decades developing satellites. They could move very quickly in a matter of months to develop their own satellites.
And Taiwan, of course, is not alone. Other countries are concerned about over-reliance on Starlink as well. What about Australia or Japan, for instance?
Well, we are here in Australia, we're facing a similar challenge for defence. We had a defence project just recently called JP 9102, which was designed to produce 4 large satellites and place them in geosynchronous orbit. Now, that project was initially cancelled in 2024 and then redefined to emphasize a multi-orbit constellation that would include small satellites in low Earth orbit. And I think that's probably where we're heading now. But once again, we have to develop the capabilities. We can either buy them off the shelf from a commercial provider, we can plug into an existing network such as Starlink, or the more sort of protected network called Starshield, or we can develop our own. And I think there is advantages in a combination of commercially provided capabilities as well as sovereign capabilities to develop skills. And I think most countries that are looking at these sorts of technologies are in a similar situation.
We know, of course, that satellites are important, but they're not the only option out there for communications. Are Taiwan and other countries looking maybe at alternative solutions?
Well, one of the alternatives is obviously submarine cables, but as has been demonstrated recently, the Chinese are quite ready to cut and sabotage those submarine cables. So there's no guarantee in wartime that the Taiwan wouldn't lose all its submarine cables very quickly. You can also use very high altitude, long endurance unmanned aerial vehicles, which people sometimes call pseudo satellites, that can act as communications relays, but they'll never have the coverage or the bandwidth of LEO-based satellites. So I do think that really small satellite technologies, small satellite mega constellations like Starlink and Starshield are the way to go for countries like Taiwan.
How do you think Beijing interprets these moves by Taiwan? Does it see them as purely defensive or as a strategic provocation? Briefly.
Well, certainly not intended by Taiwan as a provocation. If anything, it's China that is the provocative actor here, in the sense that when you look at China's space capabilities for the PLA Aerospace Force, they are developing a full suite of counter-space capabilities, commonly known as anti-satellite weapons or ASATs, that are designed to destroy satellites in orbit. And I think that Taiwan is quite rightly concerned, as is the United States and Australia and Japan, about China's intentions in regarding the use of these anti-satellite capabilities in orbit. It's critical for countries like Taiwan to have space support for their military capabilities as well as for their civil and commercial use. They cannot afford to lose that. So therefore, having a resilient space capability based on large numbers of small satellites is the best way to go.
Malcolm, thank you very much. That was Malcolm Davis from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.